Welcome to the SCM Podcast, business advice and tips with expert guest interviews and with hostess Latrice Carter, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Welcome to Sisters Creative Media Podcast, business tips and expert advice. Today's show, I want to talk about the essentials to having a podcast that grows your business. Now, who is a podcast for? It's a great tool for small businesses to grow their presence online. It can also be for speakers, authors, freelance creative, and our solo entrepreneur. There are 8 ways you can grow your podcast for your business. Now, the 8 ways are community building, content marketing, podcast content, authority building, networking, traffic generation, brand awareness, and exposure to new audience. Now, let me go a little deeper into each one of those 8 ways to grow your business. Now, community building. This connects you to your target audience that engages with your podcast. That is going to be very important. Content marketing. Creating content is vital for your business exposure. Content makes your business relevant and draws the attention of your audience. You give your audience that sense of security because they're looking at you as an expert, and then there's a perk to putting out content for your business. Google, if you're putting out added value content, Google will reward your business by moving your business up in the search engine. And by doing that, especially with using, someone can type in media expert and your business, if you're in media, it will pop up on that first page. So, and it's because you're putting out content, great content that adds value to businesses and those seeking your help. Podcast content. Your podcast isn't just audio. Your podcast can be repurposed as a blog article, as an ebook, or show notes, creating value delivery. That's also another avenue for your business that you can grow. And then also authority building. You become an expert about the services and products that you discuss on your podcast. It opens you up to opportunities to collaborate with others, to partnership with others. It also opens you up to speaking opportunities because now you're looked upon as an expert in the industry. Now, networking. This gives you an opportunity to network with other podcasters, to attend some podcast events. I know with the COVID-19, there have been a lot of virtual podcast events, and I strongly urge you to seek those out because it's a great networking opportunity, a great opportunity for you to become a guest on another's podcast show, which also gives you credibility as well as exposure for your podcast. It also generates traffic to your podcast, to your website. It allows you to reach a new audience, even with the website and active social media. So having a podcast is beneficial to generate new traffic, not just because you have a website, but also, and not because you have active social media, because you have this whole nother landing page, another platform that you are distributing content, audio content that is added value to your audience, to your listeners. Also, podcasts can also help build brand awareness, which is very important for any small business, any author, any speaker, any solo entrepreneur, any freelancer, because it's going to drive new traffic to your website. It's going to, intrigue people to know more about you and learn about your services and your products that you are selling or you're providing. Also, podcasts create an opportunity for a new audience to seek you out, which is great. Now, you also want to incorporate some best practices, is what I like to call it, for podcasts. Um, Keep a schedule, have your show on the same day, same time each week. And if you're doing a podcast twice a week, make sure you're preparing for your podcast. Um, have show notes, script, write your script out so that you can have it in front of you and you're able to go from it. A lot of times, some people might try to wing it. That's nice. Some people are really good at that. But if that's not who you are, have a script. I highly recommend typing out your show order, your structure, your script, so that it makes it easy for you to talk through your show. Um, if you're going to use music or movie clips on your podcast, please make sure you're getting the permission from someone using their music because that's copyright infringement. You will get in trouble. I know for Sister's Place, we premiere music, and so I have the opportunity of interviewing various entertainment musicians, and they give me written permission via email, via DMs to use their music or even premiere their music on the show. So make sure you're getting those permissions to avoid any legal issues. Engage with your audience. When you're first starting your podcast, you want to condition your audience to you. You want to condition them to, okay, I have a podcast every Tuesday at this exact time, 7 p.m. every Tuesday. So I want to remind them on Monday with a post on social media. I want to remind them on Sunday or Saturday with an e-blast with just a little tip, just a little short e-blast saying, hey, I'm having a podcast. Don't forget, tune in to my podcast on Tuesday. We're talking about blah, 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 blah. And if you have a special guest, put that person's name and a link to their website so that they can go and check them out to see, okay, this person must be really important. They're going to be on her show. So you want to include that so it drives your audience and it conditions your audience and reminds them, hey, I'm having a podcast. And podcast is every Tuesday. Remember, every Tuesday, 7 p.m. It helps you and you benefit from it. Also, have a podcast strategy. Now, what do I mean by having a podcast strategy? Having a podcast strategy, you're not just recording your podcast and then you're uploading it and you're done. No, that's not what I mean. Your podcast strategy is going to be what you do with your podcast after you are done recording and it's being distributed. You're going to share it to social media. You're going to send out an e-blast. You're going to create a blog. You're going to create a video. You're going to create little snippets, create questions, and then insert the link to your podcast. These are all ways to promote your podcast, to distribute your podcast. And if your podcast is on more than one channel, I would say take one day, each day of the week, you share a different link to where that podcast is streaming. So, for example, my podcasts are on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and a couple others. So I would pick Monday, I will share the Spreaker Network link. Tuesday, I will share the iTunes link. Wednesday, I will share the Spotify link. Thursday, I will share the iHeartRadio link. Friday, I will share the Google Podcast link, and so forth. And I think you kind of get where I'm going with this, so that you are promoting all of the platforms that you're on because you have an audience on each of those platforms, because everybody doesn't listen to your podcast on your host's platform. They may go to your website where you've embedded on on a landing page, and make sure you have your podcast reel player reel on your home page, on your landing home page, so that is the first thing they see, along with your other important items on your landing page, your home page, as well as having a podcast dedicated page where you have maybe pictures of your guests. You also have the players reel there as well, and so that they can go back, refer to it if they happen to, bounce on that page. That's going to be very important. Now, another part of my best practices is knowing your audience. That is so important. And why is that important? Because you want to make sure you're distributing your podcast to the right audience. That's your target market. Who is your target? Who is your target audience? So for me, I'm my target market is authors, small businesses, men and women. Your target audience may be based on whatever your topic is, or what type of podcast you have. You may have a relationship podcast. So your relationship podcast may be geared toward all women, all women ages 25 and above. Or maybe it's all women 35 and under. Who knows? But you want to make sure you know your audience, because that is going to be key. And then, also making sure you have sound check. Everybody's voice picks up different in the microphones. I've played around with 3 different microphones. I've actually bought a podcast microphone, and I also have downloaded and installed podcast speakers and microphones for the software that I'm using. So, it all depends on, what your preference is. And then also make sure that when you're looking at your host, look at what your host can do for you, not just what you can do for your host, so to speak. You want to make sure you're choosing a provider that can grow with you, so you won't have to switch providers down the line because you don't have enough storage capacity, because it's going to be based on how much you like to talk. If you're one of those people, you want to have a podcast 2-3 times a week, you need to make sure, and it's an hour show, you want to make sure that your podcast host can give you that storage capacity for the amount of time that you want to be able to talk. So that's going to be key. And then one of the other things is you also want to make sure that your website, you either have a podcast website page or you have a podcast website set up, so that you can embed your podcast playlist so that your listeners can jump on there and just click. They don't like to go searching around, trying to find where your podcast is. So I strongly recommend you having a podcast page on your website. Make sure you embed your podcast reel on your homepage, as well as on an actual podcast page. You'd be amazed at how listeners discover you and find you. You want to also examine with your host what type of analytics they provide, what type of audience analytics they provide. You want to make sure that they separate, countries. You want to see location. You want to see gender. You want to see the where your podcast is listened to the most. If they're listening to your podcast right there, if it's coming from Spreaker, if it's coming from iTunes or Spotify, YouTube, you want to see those dynamics and see where you may have to implement a marketing strategy so that you can get those numbers up, so you can capture a bigger audience on the various platforms, because you never know what or how a person listens to their podcast. I actually listen to podcasts on Spotify, and from time to time, I also listen to podcasts on YouTube. So there's, I have my picks, and I also have some on iTunes. You know, so it's, it varies. So you want to be able to grab that audience wherever you can, and the more distribution channels that your host can distribute you automatically, the better. I'm on Spreaker network, and I'm distributed to Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple, iHeart Radio, Podcast, Podchaser, Pod Addict, and a couple others. So pretty much there's like 10 streaming channels that I am maximizing my exposure. And that is something that you want to maximize your exposure, because you want to capture an audience globally. You want to grow your brand, you want to grow your awareness, and gain prospective new customers as well. That's, those are like keys that I really like to give my clients. One of the other things too is, how are you marketing your podcast? Did you know that there is a podcast directory? I'm pretty sure, for all the newbies, I'm pretty sure you may or may not know, but there's a podcast directory that I highly recommend you submit your podcast to. One of the directories is called Podcast Land, and it's via podcast subreddit. Okay. Podcast Land is a directory for podcast listeners. That's where you have a lot of listeners go there, and they pull out, they find and new topics that they can listen to that's on a podcast. So get your podcast submitted to a podcast directory. You want to create sponsorships and partnerships in exchange for free ad space. That is a great tool to do. I know we do it for Sisters Place, and I also do it for SEM. You can sponsor a show in exchange for free ad space. Now, you can also have a brand, another business sponsor a podcast show in exchange for them putting your podcast flyer or something in their actual office, or you can partner with some magazines and get your flyer put in there at a discounted rate, where you will announce their magazine on your podcast. It's all about collaboration, and that is a great method to use to grow your business exposure. Share your episodes on Quibb, Quibb. Share your episodes on there. That's opens you up to a bigger market. It opens you up to more listeners. You want to drive traffic via Reddit. If you're not on Reddit, I strongly recommend, I know when you're first getting started, this is a lot of information, but baby steps. You can build as you go. Create an auto follow system on Twitter for your podcast. Publish new episodes weekly. Now, here's a tip for iTunes for all new podcasts. And if your host distributes your podcast to iTunes, you, for the first 8 weeks, you will appear there's a section that they call news and noteworthy. And that's where they put all new podcasts that come up. And this is a great opportunity for you to get organic discovery. And so take advantage of this. If you're recording a podcast once, twice a week, this is a great opportunity for you to get your podcast exposure so you can gain that organic audience. Also, get episode titles. Try to be as detailed as possible. Give good descriptions of what your show is about. So, because a lot of people they will read what your description is, what your show is about, and that's going to determine whether or not they listen or download. And you want to get them to listen, so you want to drive them in. Get guests on your show. That is going to be good. Do interviews. Get guests on your show and get your guests to promote your podcast on their platforms as well as their email list. And then, you get invited to be a guest on other podcasts and do the same thing. That, again, great exposure for your brand, great exposure for their brand. Now, if you need help setting up your podcast, hit me up. We'll be very happy to sit down with you and create a strategy, create go through and review the best platform that is for you, train you on some best practices and tips and resources. And if you have a podcast already, feel free to reach out to us for a 30-minute consult, and we will evaluate, your podcast and let you know, how you can maximize, your podcast so that it can grow your brand exposure and reach bigger audience. We are here to help you, and we want to add that value so that you can grow your brand exposure, your brand awareness for your podcast. Visit sisterscreativemedia.com to learn about our services. I am very happy with our brand new look. And as you know, when you go to our website, you'll see what? Our podcast is on our landing page. It's on our home page. So check it out. Make sure you tune in next week. Next week, I will be talking about content marketing, a content marketing plan. Do you have a content marketing plan? We will go over some key variables for your content marketing plan. And I look forward to talking with you guys again. Until next week, be blessed and have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the show today. Be sure to tune in each week to hear interviews from business experts in the industry. Follow SCM on your favorite streaming channel, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or Google. Don't forget to follow Sisters Creative Media on all social media platforms to learn more about us.